And what is really unsettling about it is coming off of the election, those who have tried to act responsibly feel the pain of the loss. We didn't wake up after the election and think, oh, I'm upset because I was wrong. We're upset because we know we're right, but we're on the losing side of this battle. And so what does that mean for a responsible media, for a responsible electorate, for a responsible Democratic Party in this environment? The only answer is to double down in holding Donald Trump and his allies accountable and double down on trying to present a democracy that represents all people, even in a losing environment.
What does that mean, to double down?
It means to keep doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I understand the autopsy report that you go through when you're losing, but let's not overreact to this. Again, you didn't come out of the election upset because you knew you were wrong. You knew you were right, but you lost. So don't change the fundamental values. Don't just say we're going to give equity to Donald Trump, which some people are doing. In the Democratic Party, in media, among the electorate, they're saying, I just give up. We're going to give him equity. We're going to give him parity to traditional American values. No, that's absolutely wrong. You can't do that. Forgive me for saying this. You can't go to Mar-a-Lago. You can't do it. It's going to get me in trouble. You can't do that. You have to hold Donald Trump accountable for being wrong. You have to hold all of his allies accountable for being wrong. Even if that means you're in a losing environment and you're threatening your own liberty and your own, security as an American. You either believe that Donald Trump and Trumpism is wrong and is a threat to American democracy, or you don't. That's the environment. It's hard.
The number of people, including his own vice president, J.D. Vance, Joe and Mika, to Bobby Kennedy now, who have called him Hitler. You cannot walk back calling someone Hitler without being a giant coward that's just wants to be close to power or is afraid of power. By the way, to your point about just healthcare in general, Laura tweeted, did you know that free annual checkups and preventative screenings like mammograms, colonoscopies, and pap smears didn't used to be free? This is part of the Affordable Care Act. Pass it on. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just, I keep saying, Rena, as we come full circle, disinformation was the big, because they didn't win on the truth, on things that were actually Biden-Harris policies. They won on fear-mongering, on lies about the economy, about trans people, about, immigrant. If you noticed, I don't know, apparently all the dogs and cats have been eaten. There are no, because I haven't heard anything else about that now. People eating dogs and cats. The caravans are gone again. It's like magic.
Mm-hmm. You have a sitting senator taking a Facebook post and extrapolating it, making it seem like it's some widespread problem. I mean, that's what J.D. Vance did with that Facebook post about the eating the dogs in Springfield, Ohio. I mean, the woman who posted that is apologized and like, I'm so sorry. But hey, the can is already open. The monkeys are already out or crawling in, whatever you would call it. I know our viewers can't see it, but I'm wearing these earrings that have a loop of monkeys. And it's because, I mean, that's what Washington is doing. They are monkeying around with our lives. I saw them do it. I mean, just a few years after the Affordable Care Act passed, not even a year or two later, they were talking about repeal and replace.
Yeah.
And this was the Affordable Care Act. I was a young staffer, a wee staffer on Capitol Hill, working for Republicans, by the way.
Yeah.
When that whole Affordable Care Act was being crafted and then got passed, obviously landmark legislation that gets the moniker Obamacare, there were Republicans conceding how much it was going to help their own communities. I mean, the talking point at that time was there's no bureaucrat that belongs in the exam room. Look at this about face that the Republican Party has done. It's so hypocritical.
I just heard another discussion this morning beating up on Democrats for what happened and that, they need to go more centrist. How many more Republicans for Harris could there be, like you? Do you know what I mean? Like, I wanted to get your take on these analysis because every major and Republican that worked for Trump tried to warn America. Right?
There was a lot of sounding of the alarms, right? And we thought it would work. We thought we could get through to people, particularly on the message of democracy. And then also going a step further for many of us who may be anti-abortion for ourselves. I'm talking conservatives, right? Republicans for Harris, who were supportive of the Harris-Walz ticket, who were supportive of Biden in 2020. For me, I can be anti-abortion for myself. Right. But I can be pro-choice for other women. And so then that just puts me in the pro-choice camp. Right. So going a step further on that, there was a democracy argument, there was a reproductive rights, care and access argument. And essentially what we saw was people were willing to say, you know what, that stuff may matter to me, but but some other things matter a little bit more. And I think those other things were obviously the feeling of the economy, the cost of living being very burdensome, and then just geopolitical tensions that weren't there when Trump was in office. And I've been calling it luck, and I've been getting a lot of heat for that because people expect a little bit more from a political strategist. Right. But when I try to tell people it's a duopoly we have here, you can go in and you can write your brother or sister in, but that's not going to do anything. Yeah. I tried with a third party in 2016. I was the top advisor and the chief spokeswoman for Evan McMullin. We ran a 3-month sprint to try to deny Donald Trump the White House in 2016. We failed miserably, but hey, we tried. Yeah. And so in seeing that, I learned a lot more about the system than a lot of people did. And what I saw here was not an acceptance of Trump so much as just a rejection of what the people, again, who went for Trump or who helped Trump with their vote, a rejection of what they felt the Democrats were serving up. So it was always going to be a hard fight. Yeah. But hey, it was a principled fight that those of us who cared took on.
Speaking of third party, Dana Gould said, I'm sure Jill Stein has harsh words for Trump's staunchly anti-Palestinian cabinet picks. We just played Tom Homan. Everybody's been talking about, Latinos that have been interviewed on TV and elsewhere that were literally have undocumented relatives. They're like, oh, well, they don't mean us. I mean, that's one of the other stories is people voting against their self-interests. Again, whether your cause is, what was happening in Gaza, whether you're a Latino. I mean, there's a whole piece today. Here's how Trump's anti-immigrant message broke through with non-white voters. I mean, it is amazing, right? How fear-mongering and dividing can work. Even it says Trump made notable gains with voters of color despite his openly racist and xenophobic campaign messaging. A record 46% of Latinos voted for him, up 14 points from 2020. Asian American support jumped 5 points to 39%. Black support gained only 1 point at 13%. But talk about this a little bit, because it's a little, particularly, I was just thinking of Asians with his whole Kung flu and China virus. And he has been racist to every single segment of the population.
Every single one. I mean, nobody goes untouched from Trump's, I think, true ire against those who just don't want to support him because they find him problematic, whether personally or policy-wise, right? Because that's what I think it comes down to. Those numbers you just shared, though, tell a story, and a really important one that makes many of us in the political insider class, which I unfortunately am now after many years, but I can't say I didn't want to be here. I got into politics because I love people, and then when I worked for 2 members on Capitol Hill. I started to see how the system worked. I liked it less and less, but I stayed. Yeah. And so for the insider
I got into radio because I hate everyone. But go ahead. I'm kidding.
I'm not going to lie. I have those days. But I think being in politics requires you to have this sense of eternal optimism. Yeah. And the story that those numbers tell is one that I think the political establishment needs to kind of come to terms with. Yeah. Is that this is all about us versus them. When people put themselves mentally in the camp, because we're all very tribalistic, right? At the end of the day, it's what we are as humans.
This is
this part and I think for the Asian American segment, and so I'm a new American, and that I'm a daughter of immigrants from India and Africa, and I can sort of speak to the attitudes there. I think there's a sense that a lot of these people followed the law. They got in line. They followed the letter of the law almost to a fault. And they feel kind of a sense that something's being taken from them by an entire swath of people that are being let in freely. So the sort of open borders, the porous borders argument that Trump and all his ilk went out with, it resonated because it drove those people further into this mindset that they were wronged because a whole class of people who didn't follow the law were getting benefits.
I get it, but some of them came in illegally in the case of this one Latino family, and some of their relatives are still illegal. They just don't think they mean them. And so, this line in many Latino voters also disconnected from the immigration experience and hold xenophobic ideas themselves. Trump intermingled his xenophobic attacks with his economic message. In every single message, immigrants are taking your jobs, they're coming after you, said one analyst. Inevitably, particularly if you're part of certain ecosystems, you'll start to believe that rhetoric. That's a neat trick, can I just say, to make. And now I keep saying, Rena, we're in the find out in the look around and find out program very quickly. I mean, people that don't realize Obamacare is the Affordable Care Act. They have This Dr. Oz nomination seen as a potential boon for Medicare privatization. I think many people, it's like comparing it to Brexit. They have no idea what they voted for and what's coming.
I think you're touching on something that I've been thinking about a lot this past week, and what's going to happen to our social fabric here. But the reality is so many people felt like our social fabric is already unraveling. We have found ourselves in a moment where we have become even more individualistic. Like, see, our system, our society is set up for us to become so selfish, for us to become so individualistic. But what I see right now is that happening on steroids. You know, people have just started to say, well, my situation matters way more than the person next door. We don't even talk to our neighbors anymore. So it's no surprise that a lot of these same people that are going to be touched by and impacted greatly, not just touched by, these policies that they don't even really start to understand.
Yeah.
That they know they voted for, but don't even realize they fully voted for.
Yeah.
These people just need to be they need to be met in the face with it for it to sort of get down into their system, for it to really resonate with them how bad it all is. And
Yeah.
I hate to say it.
Now, speaking of steroids, Bobby Kennedy.
Oh, come on.
What?
Nothing.
Oh. I mean, first of all, it just shows part of the cowardice and hypocrisy of how we got here. I don't know if you saw this. In audio we recovered from his radio show, he read and praised a description of Trump and his supporters as belligerent idiots, outright Nazis, cowards, and bootlickers. He also compared Trump to Hitler. Right? Which makes him, I mean, it just, you know, but you wrote just a great thread about post-polio syndrome ruined the last years of my late dad's remarkable life. Had he had access to polio vaccines as a child in Uganda, he'd likely be alive today and would have been able to run and play sports with me and my siblings, among so many other things. I mean, and just that this hypocrite, this coward Bobby Kennedy is going to do God knows what, you know, in his thirst for power, right?
Yeah, I think there's just so much that can be said about it. You know, it comes from obviously a political dynasty, has been shunned by his own siblings. You know, and you can see that it's cowardice on display. RFK Jr. As much as he looks like this strong, independent voice, you know, I saw people when he announced his bid say, you know, they found him refreshing, and I think for me it was always the vaccine stances. I'm like, come on now. You say something like that, you're not in touch with the reality.
So you see refreshing, I see lunatic.
Yeah.
I love someone on Fox trying to defend Matt Gaetz yesterday. It was like, well, you know, she'd just come out and say, you know, I was a firebrand. I'm like, oh, is that a new word for rapist? You know, 2 years ago, I was a firebrand. Oh, well. Yeah.
I think that's the problem, though. People found him refreshing because they did not go beneath the surface.
Right.
And we have an electorate that is just genuinely not interested in doing that. And that's why I had to tweet that about my dad. It's like, I can like some of this stuff about RFK Jr. wanting to remove processed and food and additives or whatever. That's cool. I'm a mom. I try to make my granola bars at home. I fail miserably, but every time I go to the store, I'm empowered. I read the ingredient list. But what we're talking about with him is the fact that he openly sits on media and says, no, I didn't say that. They run the clip and this guy still is like, no, I wasn't a vaccine denier.
Yeah.
So having him at the helm, even if he's saying that he won't ban any vaccines that are currently available, it's the public health messaging.
Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. I hope you'll join me on my new audio podcast, Justice Matters. I'll be using my 30 years as a federal prosecutor and Army JAG to unpack, break down, and explain the legal issues of the day, particularly where the legal intersects with the political. Please look for Justice Matters with Glenn Kirshner wherever you generally get your podcasts.